Tonight, when the sun disappears, you'll probably barely notice. You turn on a light, your phone lights up. A television glows across the room. Streetlights illuminate the road outside. You can walk into the kitchen at midnight and see exactly where you're going. But for most of human history, none of that existed. When the sun went down, the world didn't become dim. It became black. No switch, no streetlights, no glowing screen. No emergency light waiting beside your bed, just darkness. And for ancient humans, that darkness wasn't simply an inconvenience. It changed what they could do, where they could go, what they feared, and eventually, how they slept. So what did humans actually do after sunset? The answer is much more interesting than they went to bed. Imagine you're standing outside your shelter just after sunset. A few minutes ago, you could see the landscape around you. Now the details are disappearing. The trees become silhouettes. The ground becomes difficult to see. Every sound seems louder. And somewhere beyond the fire, something moves. You don't know what it is. That was the fundamental problem with nighttime. Humans aren't particularly well designed for darkness. Our eyes are built for daylight. We don't have the night vision of many predators. We don't have the hearing of some nocturnal animals, and we certainly don't have claws or fangs. So once darkness arrived, the safest thing to do was usually stay close to shelter. But there was one technology that changed everything. Fire. Fire wasn't just a source of warmth. It created something humans had never really possessed before, a piece of daylight after sunset. Inside its glow, people could see faces. They could work. They could prepare food. They could repair tools. And most importantly, they could see what was approaching. The darkness didn't disappear. It simply stopped at the edge of the firelight. And that little circle of light became one of the most important spaces in human history. Because once people could safely remain awake after sunset, something unexpected happened. They started using the night. Imagine a prehistoric hunter returning to camp after a long day. He's exhausted, but his spear is damaged. Tomorrow, that spear might determine whether the group eats. So he sits beside the fire. He sharpens the stone, tightens the binding, checks the point. Nearby, someone is repairing clothing. Another person is preparing food. Someone else is twisting plant fibers into cord. Children are watching, learning. The night wasn't necessarily empty time. It could become maintenance time. During daylight, there were animals to track, plants to gather, water to collect, fields to work, wood to find. But after dark, those activities became difficult. So people shifted their attention to things they could do beside the fire. Tools, clothing, food, stories. And each night, the same pattern repeated. The fire didn't just give humans extra working time, it gave them something else: time together. During the day, people could be spread across a huge landscape. Hunters were tracking animals. Gatherers were searching for plants. Others were collecting wood or water. Everyone had somewhere to be. But at night, they came back. They sat together and talked. This is where the ancient night becomes fascinating. Because when you're sitting around a fire with nothing urgent to do, what do you talk about? Not just today's food, not just tomorrow's hunt. You start talking about people, places, danger, the past, the future, things you've seen, things you've heard, things you think might be true. And eventually, you start telling stories. Imagine an elder sitting beside the fire. A group of children are watching. The elder begins describing a hunt from many years earlier, a dangerous animal, a mistake someone made, how the group escaped. The children listen. And without realizing it, they're learning. Which animals are dangerous? Where water can be found? Which plants should be avoided? How to behave during a hunt? What happened to people who made certain mistakes? The story is entertainment, but it's also education. And unlike a textbook, it can be remembered, passed from one person to another, then from parents to children, then to grandchildren. The night became a place where information could survive, even when the person who discovered it was gone. Eventually, the fire burned lower. The stories stopped. People settled down, and most of us would assume the next thing that happened was simple. Everyone slept until morning. But human sleep may not always have worked exactly like ours does today. Historical records from much later societies contain repeated references to something called first sleep and second sleep. The basic idea was simple. People would go to bed relatively early, sleep for several hours, wake during the night, stay awake for a while, then return to sleep until morning. That middle period could be surprisingly active. People prayed, talked, visited neighbors, reflected, read when reading was possible, or simply stayed awake in the darkness. And here's the strange part. Today, if you wake up at 2 in the morning, you might immediately think, something is wrong. You check the clock. You reach for your phone. You try desperately to force yourself back to sleep. But for much of history, waking during the night wasn't necessarily treated as a medical problem. It could simply be part of the night. There's another thing we've almost completely forgotten. Ancient humans didn't experience darkness the way we do. Today, even when we think we're in darkness, we're usually not. There are streetlights, buildings, cars, phones, signs, windows glowing in the distance. Even the night sky itself is brighter in cities. But imagine standing outside thousands of years ago. No electricity, no cities glowing over the horizon, no aircraft lights, no illuminated roads. On a clear night, the stars would have been overwhelming. The Milky Way wouldn't be something you see in a photograph, it would be directly above you. And the darkness between the stars would be enormous. For ancient humans, that was normal. Night wasn't simply a darker version of daytime, it was a completely different environment. Some animals became active, others disappeared. Distances became difficult to judge. Familiar places suddenly looked unfamiliar. A journey that took an hour during daylight could become extremely dangerous after sunset. So ancient people developed habits around darkness. Stay close to the fire. Stay near the group. Keep dangerous animals away. Finish important tasks before sunset. Return home before the landscape becomes difficult to navigate. In other words, humans didn't conquer the night. They learned how to live around it. And eventually, everything changed. Candles became more common. Oil lamps spread. Gas lighting transformed cities. And then came electric light. Suddenly, darkness wasn't something you had to accept. You could push it back. A street that would once have been pitch black could become bright. A house could stay illuminated long after sunset. Work could continue. Shopping could continue. Travel could continue. Entertainment could continue. The natural boundary between day and night began disappearing. And humans loved it. Because light gave us freedom. But it also changed something deeper. Think about your own evening. The sun goes down, but your brain doesn't necessarily receive the message, the day is over. Your room is still bright. Your television is bright. Your phone is bright. Your laptop is bright. You can communicate with someone on the other side of the world at 3 in the morning. You can order food, watch a movie, work, play games, scroll through thousands of pieces of information. The ancient world had a natural stopping point. We removed it. And that may be one of the biggest changes modern technology ever made to human behavior. The ancient night had something ours often doesn't. Silence. There was no notification waiting, no message, no endless stream of information, no algorithm trying to keep you awake. After the fire went quiet, there was very little competing for your attention. You could talk, think, listen, watch the stars, or simply do nothing. And perhaps that's why the night became such an important place for human imagination. Because when the world becomes quiet, your mind has room to wander. They didn't spend every night staring into a fire, and they certainly didn't all follow the same routine. But after sunset, humans could repair tools, prepare food, make clothing, care for children, socialize, tell stories, teach, plan, sing, rest, watch the fire, and eventually, sleep. The darkness that once made humans vulnerable became something they learned to organize their lives around. Fire gave them light, shelter gave them safety, and the group gave them company. For hundreds of thousands of years, human beings lived with the same basic rhythm. Sunrise meant activity. Sunset changed the rules. Darkness meant staying close. Fire meant gathering together. Night meant slowing down. Then, in only a tiny fraction of human history, we changed everything. We turned night into day. We made darkness optional. And now, most of us rarely experience true darkness at all. So tonight, when you switch off your bedroom light, don't imagine that you're experiencing the same darkness your ancestors knew. You're not. The street outside is glowing. Your phone is probably within reach. Somewhere nearby, electricity is still humming. For ancient humans, darkness meant the world had changed. For us, it usually just means it's time to sleep. But for thousands of generations before electricity, the night was when people gathered around fires, when tools were repaired, when children learned, when stories were passed from one generation to another, when people stared into the darkness and imagined what was beyond it. We didn't just invent artificial light, we changed the rhythm of human life. And perhaps the strangest thing of all is that the darkness our ancestors spent their entire lives knowing has become something most of us actively try to avoid. The sun still sets every night, but humanity doesn't have to go to sleep with it anymore. If you enjoy exploring how ancient humans actually lived, not just the wars, kings, and monuments, but the ordinary moments that shaped our species, subscribe to Primal Explained. Because sometimes, the most fascinating part of ancient history is discovering that the world our ancestors lived in was completely different from the one we take for granted.